Welcome back to Out of the Fog. Well, a local reporter takes action when faced with a sexist slur while on the job, plus an 11-day hunger strike and numerous protests from fisherpersons at DFO and FFAW offices this week. Where did that get them? Well, joining me now to share their thoughts, the Telegram's James McLeod and Ashley Fitzpatrick, and lawyer and political commentator Melissa Royal. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you all here.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
All right, so let's start with the fishery, of course. Richard Gillett, he's a fisherman and a VP for Fish NL, went on a hunger strike which lasted 11 days. At that 11th day, he went to the hospital and he was looking for a review when it comes to DFO scientific studies and stock management. Outside of the meeting with the federal minister for fisheries and oceans, which they said that was secured and that's going to come in the coming weeks, what exactly do you think this accomplished?
Well, we're talking about it, and that's big because right now the fishery is really in a huge state of crisis. I mean, when you talk about the crab and the shrimp cuts, that's been huge, and when you look at the level of anger around the province, you've got fishermen burning their gear on the Northern Peninsula, you've got the hunger strike at FFAW, I've lost track of the number of windows that have been smashed, and there really hasn't been much in the way of leadership as we struggle with this. I haven't heard much from the provincial government, and Dominic LeBlanc, the federal minister, has been largely absent from the conversation here. So really having someone sort of seize the conversation and drive it is bringing this to the attention of the public. And I think that's worth something all on its own.
Mm-hmm. Ashley, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's interesting because people are talking about it, but that's always been the case with the fishery. You know, there's always something happening that's worth talking about. It's the reason why the fisheries broadcast has always been a success here. I think one of the major problems that we've consistently had, and it's really coming out right now, is that a lot of people aren't understanding of the details. You know, they don't grasp exactly what's possible at this point, you know, what solutions are there, and some of that may be in terms of the political commentary around it, but this has really been going on for years. You know, you can go right back to when that MOU was happening under the PC government, and the fact that they said at that time, you know, we're going to let the fishery sort of deal with itself in terms of some of the issues that we see there. And I think at that point, there was a lot of disconnect, and it may be, as we see more of this, because there will be more of this, especially as you see plant closures, that we're going to have to start getting into the details as a whole, as a public, as a province. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be tough, I think, for a lot of people.
All right, and Melissa, I'd like you to weigh in.
I agree with James and Ashley that that it's bringing attention, whether or not he accomplished the goals he set out to do. He definitely did get a lot of people talking about it, and maybe my friends here think that, you know, it's talked about a lot. I think it's been talked about outside of journalistic circles, kind of in the mainstream, a lot more this week than it normally would be because of this, right? And I think another interesting issue is the fact that he maintained that this was not a Fish NL protest, right? Whether that's true or not, I don't think a lot of people bought that. I think a lot of people, whether they meant to or not, are considering it a Fish NL protest. So that adds another layer of kind of confusion, but also intrigue to it. And I think everyone's glad that he gave up on the hunger strike, just because that's, you know, nobody wishes ill on anybody doing it. But I think he did accomplish part of what he was looking at to do.
Yeah, I think we've got to acknowledge too that the Fish NL connection really does complicate things in terms of the response there, right? So he has been out as a representative of that would-be union. So when you're talking about the government maybe sitting down and having talks, you know, whatever government representative, that becomes a much more significant thing than if it was a fisherman who hadn't been politically involved prior to that. So I think that too should probably be acknowledged when we're talking about Fish NL or not Fish NL and the response there.
Mm-hmm. Does this somewhat become not a war, but a struggle, you know, between the two, between Fish NL and FFAW, and leading towards, you know, they're looking for, they were one of the things that they were looking for in protesting, they wanted a meeting, but they wanted the media there. And the FFAW said, you know, we'll have a meeting with you, but we don't want the media present. I guess the big question too is that, you know, where does this go from here? How do they move forward?
Yeah, I guess one of the big things is just a question of who speaks for the fishermen, and the struggle in assessing all of this is a lot of the fishermen are saying that the union doesn't speak for them. And so that internal fight is really bubbling up into a lot of different ways, and you know, it's showing up outside the DFO office, it's showing up outside the FFAW office, and yeah, I don't really know how that's all going to play out.
Right, okay. Well, certainly a story that we'll be watching, I'm sure, speaking about down the road. I want to move on now to Heather Gillis, who was a NTV reporter who was working during the time and faced with an obscenity that was yelled at her. Now, she took a picture of the person in the truck. I can't repeat what this person said, but it's certainly one of the things that a lot of female journalists have been faced with, certainly over the last year. Just curious as to, I guess, as a female reporter, Ashley, have you ever been faced with this obscenity?
I haven't personally, but I do know that, especially, it's pretty prevalent with a lot of the television reporters, and it really is a lot of times tied to that stand-up in a public space where people can just sort of walk up and do it at any point, say what they like into the camera, and there's some debate over, you know, is it attention to the play to the camera for attention, or is it really directed against the particular individual? You know, I think for all of us, it really doesn't matter. I think the journalists that I've always spoken with have always said that they're sort of a unified front. I mean, this is silly, it's ridiculous, and there's just no need for it. Mm-hmm. I think in Heather's case, I mean, it goes without saying, she is one of the best reporters in the province, and her actions in this case are wholly supported. She's got a lot of people behind her. So there's, you know, really not much more to it than that, I think.
Right. In an interview actually with the Canadian Press, she said, "I'm fed up, I'm tired of it. No one should have to endure this while they're working. I'm a professional and I was humiliated interviewing a politician. It's time for it to stop now." So she took a picture, posted that to shame this person publicly. But she has been faced with a lot of backlash herself for even moving forward and trying to stand up for her and her fellow colleagues.
That's right, and that's the interesting thing about it. I mean, she took ownership of a situation that could be, you know, degrading and humiliating and awful, and said, "I'm going to deal with this," and went ahead to help pressing charges against the individual. But she did that again with the response she got to that, which I really I respect her for doing that a lot. She's been actually posting to social media the responses she's gotten, some of which are absolutely terrible. You know, completely unfounded, ridiculous statements that she deserved it for this reason or that, or, you know, it's no big deal, or lighten up. And what really gets me is when people are saying, "Oh, it's just a young guy." I mean, he's 2 years younger than her, and she was doing what she's doing 2 years ago, you know? So using kind of an age or kind of a lighten up thing, I don't buy that. So I think she's been handling it incredibly well, and I think you're right that everyone's supporting her.
Mm-hmm. James, what are your thoughts on this particular event?
Well, I mean, I think it's absolutely horrible, and it's refreshing to see charges laid in this case. And one of the things that I sort of picked up, there was a thread on social media about the fact that this was somehow a free speech issue, and it's kind of funny because as journalists, we're like among the most ardent free speech advocates out there. But every single person who's been to journalism school knows that there are rules. There are libel laws in this country. There are hate speech laws in this country. There are things you're just like it. Free speech is not absolute unlimited carte blanche, and it's up to society to set reasonable limits on where those lines are. And I think this is a pretty clear-cut case.
It's also up to the criminal code to set those lines.
Right. Yeah, it is. I mean, it is one of those things, though, that'll get worked out in the court. I think the really significant piece here was for that message to be sent that whatever does come from this, there is a line drawn, and it's not tolerated by the majority of the people out there, and you need to be aware of that. So there are consequences that may not come from the legal system for this individual. You know, it may be simply a case of that social shaming, but that's pretty damaging in and of itself.
Okay, definitely. Well, actually, we have to leave it there. We're all out of time. I want to thank you all very much for joining me here this evening.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. You can, of course, leave your comment by calling 757-9600. You can email outofthefog@rci.rogers.com, and we are also on social media on Facebook and Twitter. Look us up. We'll be right back.